Welcome to HSDF the Podcast, a collection of policy discussions on government technology and homeland security brought to you by the Homeland Security and Defense Forum. In this second of a two-part series, Patrick Walsh, Chief of Contracting Office at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Nick Martinelli, Director of the Information Technology Contracting Division at Customs and Border Protection, and Bill Weinberg, Assistant Administrator for Contracting and Procurement at Transportation Security Administration, discuss the speed of acquisition around emerging technologies and efforts to support artificial intelligence initiatives. Featuring Patrick Walsh, Chief of Contracting Office, Information Technology Division, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Nick Martinelli, Director of the Information Technology Contracting Division, Office of Acquisition, Customs and Border Protection, Bill Weinberg, Assistant Administrator for Contracting and Procurement and Head of Contracting Activity, Transportation Security Administration, Jonathan Album, Federal Chief Technology Officer, ServiceNow. This discussion took place at the HSDF Technology Innovation and Government Symposium on February 22, 2024.
Bill, I want to jump back to you for a second. Part of this panel is about emerging technology. You have, the most experience of anybody up here buying technologies. You've seen a lot of emerging technologies over your time. Today, maybe it's artificial intelligence, but, before it was cloud. Before that, it might have been, something else. How have you gone about advising your CIOs and IT leaders, the folks with the requirements on how to embrace and use these things that we're hearing about, but maybe we don't know how to purchase yet?
What's interesting about that is that embracing emerging technology really involves taking on risk. And some CIOs, organizations are risk averse, very risk averse, and some recognize the value of taking on risk to meet the mission. When you work in an organization like DHS, which is very threat-oriented, mission-centric, you have to be able to take on risk because the adversaries that you're dealing with have no risk parameters at all. They have no, I've often said that if we could get the enemy, the threat actors to go through the same type of budget and approval process that we go through, we might be more on a level playing field. But by the time we get out of our own way in the government, they're on to the third generation of whatever it is they're developing. So we really need to be more agile. And so being aware of what's available and being able to, through the acquisition, and I won't even just say procurement process, but through the acquisition process, to be flexible enough to, either pilot and or bring on new technologies quick enough to make them matter. People often criticize the length of the acquisition process, and procurement's really a fairly small part of that, because by the time, I get people visit me all the time and say, we've got this great product, we think you could use it, this particular division or whatever. To turn that into a requirement, get it funded, that takes a long time. We can go buy it in a couple months, probably, but getting it into the acquisition framework, and, DHS some years ago evolved their own DoD 5000, structure I wouldn't say they did it to enhance procurement or acquisition. It's more like the DoD structure, and we're fighting threats every day. I mean, we need to have a construct that allows us to say, I was at a vendor, and our administrator will do that. I was up at someplace in Boston or Silicon Valley, and I saw something we need to buy that right away. I can't wait 3 years to get that. I can't wait 6 months to get that. I want to buy that right now and start fielding it. And we have the tools to be able to do that if they can get the money. Money sometimes is one of our biggest obstacles, but understanding what's out there, understanding what you're trying to do, and working with the procurement people, as has been said on the panel also, we're sort of, I always tell people, we're kind of like the Make-A-Wish Foundation. You got something you need, bring a definition of it, bring the money, and we'll make it happen for you.
So let's apply that to artificial intelligence. I'm sure everybody here is wondering, well, how are these tools going to, especially generative AI tools, make it into agency missions, into the way agencies operate? executive order on artificial intelligence is, I think, a great start. But there's a lot of unanswered questions in there, and as providers of technology, we're working to answer those questions with government. So, what's that conversation like in your offices today? Are you getting requests? I want to use ChatGPT. I want to use this Gen AI tool.
I'd say we're probably at the beginning of what you're hearing. We're using some robotics, RPA, to automate some very manual, less thought-involved processes today. AI may be being used out there in the intel community to try to analyze data better. I think there's more risk attached to it today than there is. I think we're more looking at how to counter it as it tries to subvert our effectiveness as threat responders. So we're at the beginning stage. I think later you're going to hear from Eric Heisen, who's our new AI official, and I'd be interested to hear that also. But I think we're starting slow. We have to determine what AI can do for us, and we have to make sure it's secure. I think we're in the middle of embracing and implementing cybersecurity everywhere to protect the data. A lot of the DHS components create and store a lot of data. We have to protect that, number one, and we don't want to introduce things that we don't fully know what they're going to do. So I think that's a little bit of a risk-based.
So how about a CBP, Nick? Any clear use cases, or what are you hearing from OIT?
Well, I think that the Bill's tease for Mr. Heisen was very good, and in the procurement shop we have had conversations about AI, but it's very much in its nascent stage in terms of its use. We use RPA, and I think that we're with a lot that we do and the mission that we have our heads down meeting the need of the day, and we're relying on our partners in OIT to assist us with the AI piece. But it's so soon for us in terms of that type of using it within our office. This is nothing against this part of the how the government works, but we just moved to electronic contract files a couple of years ago. So that leap, will it come? Yes, but not right. We're not there right now.
Can you envision, and Patrick, I'd love to get your perspective on this too, you envision an opportunity to use generative AI capabilities to make contracting more efficient? Could you, summarize proposals? Could you generate RFPs? Are there ways to? It's a laborious process at times, right? Could you summarize? Summarizing a proposal, rank or some. Are those things that are conceivable in your office? What do you think, Patrick?
You want to take that, Nick, or? Okay, I wasn't sure who that was.
No, it was you start. Well, I'd love to get Bill's perspective on it too.
Yeah, I think there's huge potential. There's the short term and there's the long term. Short term, thankfully, DHS gave us permission recently on government computers to use generative AI, a few different large language models. So I think the short term, we're using that for market research. We're using that for all.
Tell me how you use it for market research.
Okay, yeah, and I do want to say we can only use that for non-public data. So all the data that Bill's referring to, off limits. But as far as like using it for market research, I had a zero trust requirement that I was, and this was actually pre-authorization, so I was doing it on my personal computer. But so how do we assess a sole source justification if we haven't adequately done our market research? ChatGPT, who are the leaders in this zero trust category of, because I had been told that there's really only one player in the game. I consulted the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and that gave some information, but ChatGPT kind of got me started down the path of, hey, here are the other players in the game for this. So long term, yeah, absolutely. There's going to be, I think the sky's the limit if we have if we kind of have our handcuffs off. So right now we're handcuffed to using only certain kinds of data, but we're law enforcement. So if law enforcement officers could go in there into a chat GPT and get CBP, get TSA data and ICE data just with a simple prompt, I think it's doable. It's a question of whether or not we're comfortable enough with these language models.
Sort of what you're describing are domain-specific large language models, right? They're smaller. They're focused on a particular kind of data. They're more curated. They have an intention. It's not all the data on the internet. So, I mean, those smaller large language models I think we're going to see a lot of those come from industry into go ahead. That's something I see coming.
Well, and the reality is when we start seeing proposals generated using AI, why not evaluate them using AI?
Mm-hmm. That doesn't scare me. I mean, there's inherently governmental functions. Mm-hmm. So inherently, the contracting officer is going to be the one who's obligating money. And that's why I'm so happy that we're up here, is we're the gatekeepers. So whether or not ChatGPT churns out a brilliant interpretation of these proposals and turns it into something that's passably good English, it's going to be the contracting officer that puts pen to ink. So keeping that human in the loop. Also, I think a lot of the fear is that a lot of really smart people are afraid of bias in large language models, and they know a lot more about it than me, and I respect their authorities on this. There is that human element of bias as well in reviewing a proposal, so you can't eliminate bias. Just everybody has preconceived notions that go into your interpretation of a proposal, and the fact that that's part of the calculus in bringing on board these large language models, I think, is only going to make government.
I appreciate that we're talking about it, right? And, that there's guidance from DHS and an approach to begin a conversation, because it's coming, right? It's going to be impossible to avoid. It'll just take longer, and it won't turn out as well if we're not engaging in this kind of dialogue today. So that's a very positive side. Nick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
I mean,
we want audience questions too. Mm-hmm. But Nick, why don't you share?
No, I think that I like having the opportunity to work with my team and hear from them, and they all bring unique perspectives to the jobs that they have. I rely on them. They do a great job, and I want them to continue doing a great job. So I might be the opposite, but I don't want them being removed from the process. I think that they're bringing business acumen to the process, and I'm not aware of a chat GPT or an AI that's going to have bring all that different perspective and experience to the process, where that is going to be able to make a fair and reasonable determination, which is the soul of our job, and be able to do the things that they're able to, that sort of unique experience and to the process. So, I like the job that they're each doing. I want them to continue doing that, what they're doing, and I think they hold a unique place in the process. And I kind of shudder that we would use something other than a government official to rank a proposal or understand what each contractor's unique technical approach is. So. And that goes for our evaluators as well.
It'd be interesting to see how this evolves. We have about 5 minutes left. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Good, no questions. So,
You pick. All right, woman on the
5 minutes left. That's it.
Just share your name and where you're from.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Joanne Newkirchen. I'm a federal employee with FEMA, and I'm actually going to raise a question that's on the topic of IT modernization, but you have not yet discussed today, and that is related to the DHS CIO's strategic objective to support modernization in place. And I'm wondering whether that's a topic that you've engaged with on the contracting side, and how you see that potentially changing operations and maintenance contracting going forward.
Well, I'm sure if Bobby McCain were here, he would say, no, Bobby McCain was supposed to join us on the panel. He didn't. modernization, some of it's being forced, by the data center closing down and everybody moving to the cloud, implementing cybersecurity, modernizing to use workflow tools that are emerging. So we're certainly having those conversations. We have a relatively new CIO at TSA, and he's and his new team, as they're coming on board, are taking some new viewpoints to how we ought to be doing IT and governance and modernization at TSA. So over the next couple of years, I think you're going to see a transformation to different ways of doing things, a little bit more enterprise approach to IT services, not having siloed platforms. Right now we've got people using SharePoint in every office, different instance, and looking at Salesforce or ServiceNow. And I think he wants to consolidate some of that. So we are having those discussions to, for several reasons. One is efficiency and optimization of resources, but just to take advantage of some of the tools and technology that's coming up. So we are having those. I think it varies by component, but we're certainly trying to do a lot of that now.
I want to see if we can get one more question in here. David, gentleman up front.
Thank you. Slava Kass with Sky Solutions. I really thought the discussion about taking on risk in the context of the DHS environment was very interesting, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit if you could. So in order to take on risk, I think also have to define the problem, right, as you were pointing out, Bill, in a way that allows industry to almost provide solutions that can reflect the risk that is defined in the problem in a way, right? And so do you find that there is an education process that needs to occur with your CEOs, with your cores, or the people who are actually creating the SUs and SOWs and PWSs, et cetera, to formulate the problem in a way that allows the industry to respond in a way that can integrate innovation, that can innovation, that can integrate solutions that are innovative enough that sort of keep you on the edge with the landscape.
Are we talking about risk and innovation in the same conversation?
Right, how to implement risk. And right, if you're risk averse, you're not going to want to change anything. You're going to want to double down on security and ICE and CBP. I'm sorry, CBP. Nick, are you seeing that risk innovation dialogue?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the communication that we have with industry, earlier on in the process, that they're going to tell us, their thoughts about the problems that we have. I think that it's a sort of a scale in terms of working with our contracting staff in terms of how they deal with risk. We try to be as engaged with industry as possible and let those individuals know that there is no risk in talking with ultimately our partners and meeting the mission. We're only going to get better outcomes if we're working with folks, and that they're our partners as opposed to a problem that we have to deal with. And so that's how we engage with industry, and we want to be. There's a time and a place for being risk averse, but we try to mitigate that as much as possible, and we want to be as forward leaning as possible with how we do things on a day-to-day basis, so that and that's one way to mitigate risk.
Final thought, Patrick. Do you want the last word
on risk?
Yeah, risk, innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I'll bring it back to AI. Like, how are we going to deal with the risk of falling behind on AI? How are we going to, mitigate that risk? And we're having conversations about funding. All the budget stuff happens before it lands on contracting's desk, but we advise, and like I said, we're the gatekeeper. So we have test cases. DHS has a list of AI test uses. How much of that is going to get funded? How are we going to mitigate the risk of us not having some of these efficient large language models that we see could utilize? Like if I was able to type that in and get an RFP churned out in 30 seconds versus 2 weeks, get it to industry, get their input on it.
You'd speed it all up.
Right.
So it's that collaboration we talked about in the beginning. It's having that conversation about innovation, but recognizing risk and realizing we have to live with it. We can't avoid it. But
10 seconds. And we talk about AI. I would urge people, if you see a problem that we advertise and you think there's an AI solution that can help solve it, that's what we want to hear about.
All right. Well, what a great way. Go ahead, Nick.
One thing, and this is more, I know Patrick talked a little bit about the contracts at the beginning. I did want to just make one announcement regarding upcoming procurements for CBP, Enterprise Business Management and Support Services 2.0. So we had put in an announcement on SAM and also, I believe, on eBuy about our plans holding a industry day and a draft RFP. We do plan on doing that. We do plan on doing it very soon. And I also wanted to just say, just for everyone's awareness, we do not plan on using a self-scoring model. So that's going to be the approach. Come on. We will not be using a self-scoring approach for EBMSS 2.0.
Thank you for tuning in. You can follow HSDF the podcast on any major podcast platform. Visit hsdf.org to learn more about the Homeland Security and Defense Forum.